Welcome to Cyber News Live, the Drop Bear podcast. Today we're welcoming Aaron Mog from Stairwell. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, let's get started. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of cyber?
Yeah, that's a long and crazy story, but I have been in cyber since 2000, like fall 2000, so coming up on 24 years of doing this. And then I was in IT for a little bit before that. I was kind of very early web designer, internet guy. I actually helped bring the first internet lines into Wisconsin, where I'm from. So I've been doing this a long time. I got into cyber sort of by accident. I was doing tech, and I got bought by a company called Royal Bank of Canada, which is one of the big Canadian banks. And they sort of flew down to Toronto and said, hey, you are now the security guy for this company, even though I was just basically doing firewall work, which I think a lot of us were back then. And then I sort of made my way into the vendor side of the world and ended up at a company called Hapsis here in Chicago, which was one of the kind of original hacker firms. And I've pretty much been doing threat ever since. So that was 2004. It's about 20 years of doing external pen testing, threat response, incident response. I think I've had probably 18 or 20 different gigs over the years doing different stuff, worked with a lot of the same people over and over again. But I really love it. I love kind of the liveliness of it. I'm not, a trained professional in the sense I didn't go to school for it, but obviously back then, we all sort of came from somewhere else. It's been quite the journey. That's for sure.
And did you go down the educational path of getting certified or getting any certificates, or was it more graduation, university type of pathway?
Yeah, so I primary learning on the job. I think my original CISSP number was 3,200 something. And they're probably in the half millions by now. So that was a long time ago. And then I would say, I was PCI certified before that was a thing. I actually ended up in security very early, what we used to call BS 7799, which was ISO before it was ISO. So I actually went to England and got certified as a BS 779 auditor, which led me to working at Accenture, which was my first consulting gig. So I've picked a few up along the way, probably not in the last few years because I'm kind of a glorified field CISO these days, but I don't get as much hands-on as I used to. But yeah, I've taken classes, over the years and things, and have been very lucky to surround myself by some of the smartest people working in security over the years that I've just kind of learned from. And my role in life is generally to connect customers or people in need with really smart people. I'm not the smart person, if that makes sense. I'm more like, let me introduce you to the people who know how to do this. And I'm more of a facilitator than a hands-on practitioner at this point.
Okay, great. And you mentioned Toronto. Whereabouts are you based today?
So physically I'm in Chicago, north suburbs of Chicago. But kind of grew up doing security in Wisconsin, and then have traveled the world doing this. But mostly I've worked for companies in the Bay Area over the years that were startups. I have a lot of experience in sort of startup land and funded startups, a few East Coast ones, and then a lot of VAR. So I worked for Gary Fish and his companies a few times. I just came from a few stops ago at Trace3, which is a big VAR. I like VARs because there's a big menu, right? So I'm a problem solver. So if I work for Stairwell right now, it's great. We have an awesome product, but I have one product, right? Sometimes when you're in a VAR, it's nice because you have 3,000 products. You don't really have to say no that often. It's always like, yeah, I can figure that out. So it's different versions of sort of problem solving. One's at scale, one's point solution, but both are fun in their own ways.
Oh, great. And what would you like to tell our audience about Stairwell?
So Stairwell is a company about almost 4 years old, or just turned 4 years old. So our CEO, Mike Wyshek, was the founder of the TAG group at Google. So TAG was the first incident response group inside Google. Mike is literally the person who found Aurora, which was the first kind of nation state breach of Google. And literally discovered it like while he was sitting at a table eating a burrito, and kind of figured out that they were breached. And that spawned obviously a tremendous amount of spend within Google around incident response and those types of things. And then he built a company called Chronicle, which was one of the Project X Google projects, which is like a company that sort of Google funds and brings up inside of its Project X, and it became a pretty big security solution. And then when Google brought Chronicle back into Google to be part of their cloud stack, he left and started Stairwell, which is fundamentally a SIM for firewalls, or for files, and binaries. So it's, instead of collecting log and telemetry data at scale, we collect files and store them in massive search engine data sets that allow us to scalably do detection engineering and all sorts of fun stuff. So that's what I do right now. I'm with what we call the forward deployed CISO, which is basically a field CISO with a little bit more engineering thrown in. So I'm a little bit more responsible for product engineering, roadmap type of stuff than maybe your normal field CISO at Palo Alto or something, where you're kind of more on the customer side of the fence. I'm a little bit of a bridge between the two. But yeah, I love it. It's a great company. I'm just coming up on about a year here, so it's been a very, very intense year. A startup, every day at a startup is like a year at a regular company. Like, it's so much going on. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love the startup field, that entrepreneurial, I was doing some background research on Stairwell, and I saw, your Series A and Series B. Can you talk to, maybe your Series A a little bit, and the Series B, and how that's affected the company, and where you sort of be going?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously not being, although I've seen the original pitch deck and things like that, Mike was one of those guys where it was somewhat of a, what do you want to do? Here's some money, which obviously most entrepreneurs are not in that position. You have to have your TAM and your product market fit. You have to have that figured out before you do your A. The seed was, I think, fairly easy for him, and even the A was fairly easy for him. It was kind of a exercise in talent versus an exercise in solution. Again, not that Mike didn't have a solution, but like, he's one of these guys that he's probably a 100x engineer. Like, they kind of read about these guys at Silicon Valley, where they sit down in one night and write a whole product. Right? How did you do that? So I think people were sort of excited to give him money because they want in on Mike's brain. As he matured Stairwell into what I would consider more of a full-formed offering, he probably could not have timed it better. So he went out in kind of mid 2022 and started raising the B round, which ended up being, I think, somewhere around 70 million, maybe it was like 69 million or something like that. And just top tier VCs, right? So Sequoia was probably the most legendary VC, Excel, a lot of really kind of special VCs that really give you a lot of network along with their money. There are VCs who give you money, and there's VCs who give you connections, and obviously Sequoia does both. So that's been really great. We have a pretty exceptional board. We have some really exceptional board observers, George Tennant, Eric Schmidt, guys that really help our company steer in the right direction. Then obviously our VCs on our board are fantastic and super experienced. So it's not a path that's available to everyone. It's kind of one of those, I've already done it once, I have a win, and then I can go and do it again. If you and I were starting a company, it would be a very, very different journey to funding. But even now, there's money out there, I think, for innovation, for ideas. That doesn't always have to be you've done it before, in my opinion.
Well, let me just take you back there. That's 2022, you're saying mid. So realistically, looking at the economy and the tail end of COVID, to raise that amount of money in that economy was just incredible.
Yeah, it'd be even harder right now, for sure. It was probably maybe the twilight of the hyper funding was going on in cyber, where it was like, you see the companies like Lacework doing $1 billion rounds, C rounds, and even some D&E rounds. That is much more difficult today, right? So, this is sort of before interest rates got really high, pushed up. I think as the clock kind of went through 2023 and now obviously in 2024, you're just going to come across tougher terms. You're going to come across less funding, doing more with less, shorter windows to profitability. VCs aren't as interested in moonshots anymore unless you happen to be doing AI. If you're doing AI, you can still get away with the moonshotty kind of stuff. But in cyber, it's like, show me the path, show me the way to an exit, and even probably more important, ARR or some form of revenue. It just isn't what it used to be, where they were. And not that good VCs are still patient, because they know it's a 8 to 10 year journey, and these things don't happen overnight. But there are incremental kind of decision things that go along the way to go hey, if Stairwell ever wants to raise a C, around there's certain things we have to go do, and it's just different than it was before. It's beyond just grow. Like grow is still important, grow is still the thing, but grow plus something. Grow plus you're changing a market or category creation, or grow plus you're the most attractive acquisition target in the market, or grow plus AI or something. You need a better story than just like I bought the market, right? Which in security is really hard to do anyway, for sure, because buying the market in security is not like buying the market in consumer. Like you and I can go raise $100 million and build a consumer brand that has quite a bit of traction. Doesn't mean it's profitable, but we could get there. You can't really do that in enterprise. Like you kind of can, but like I can't pay off an FSI stack member to put all their trust in me. They have the money already. They don't need my money. So it's just a difficult proposition to sort of buy your way to. You got to grow smart. You got to grow in a way that's meaningful.
Yep. Now, just to go back there, you mentioned AI and FSI, Zach. I've just finished up 2 days with US government and industry where we sort of come together. And one of the major topics, it's all AI. For 2 days we're talking about AI threats, fraud, and, what does that look like? What does AI look like for you and Stairwell?
So I think like most things in our space, the adversaries will go first. Is kind of the way it works. Like companies just move slow for the most part. So we are certainly expecting and starting to see just a massive rise in, I would say, sort of AI enabled threats. Like they're not AI threats. Like there's not like an AI bot writing phishing emails, but tuning them for sure, right? Creating better, more clickable threats. Tuning and obfuscating malware, right? Like running malware through multiple iterations to come out clean, using AI in labs to replicate user behavior in order to evade, EDRs and things like that. Like that's all there. It's all coming. It's all in place. On the responder side, on the blue team side of things, it's super immature, and a lot of it's hype. Like just to be candid in our industry, like it's really, really hard. The early adopters of AI in security have been sales teams to generate content and blog posts and things like that. It hasn't really been in the SOC. That being said, I think the most interesting use cases that we're working on are, I would say, sort of decision engines and comparison engines, right? So we're a company that looks at malware, right, and says, okay, how do I build connections between these things? How do I do variant analysis? How do I do pivoting around and say, hey, these two things are related? And we have very, very talented malware reverse engineers on staff, and so do our customers. This is what they do all day, every day, right? How do I make an AI decision engine that thinks like them? It's not going to be as good as them yet, but how do I chop the bottom 80% of the market off with automation? And not automation as in if A equals B, do C. It's more this plus this plus this means it's suspect, and let's score it that way, right? And I think it's where a lot of EDR companies are using AI too. It's just like smarter. Like, can I add 100 factors to my decision engine because it's being done by AI versus the 12 a human being can handle, right? Human beings are very limited in their decision matrix. Like you go, I can handle a hash, I can handle an IP address, I can handle a domain, I can handle some signature data, I can handle some alerts. But you start factoring in, the time of day, is it relative to normal work hours in the Philippines versus work hours in Florida, and is that the right time for that packet to come? Like that's so hard. Like it's the hardest thing to do in security, right? And so we start thinking about the model of like, is this normal given 100 factors versus 2, right? Yes, Rob is normally in Florida and he logged in from China today. That's weird. Maybe you are in China, but then I can integrate that with my corporate travel data set. I know you got on a plane to China, so I can make a better decision. Like that's the kind of things AI can do that just humans are slow at. So that's, I'd say, the biggest use case that we have for it. And then obviously like summarizing data sets is awesome. Like you can go, here's like we work a lot with Yara, right? It's like how do you make an AI bot that writes good Yara, right? It's basically ChatGPT. It's just content, in, content out. But it's so eager to please that it overwrites everything, and so like I think that's been a big challenge for us. It's just like the language models around detection engineering are really immature. We work on it every day. I have a team here that works on AI. In fact, Instead of RSA next week, Mike's going to Eric Schmidt's AI conference in DC to talk about the future of AI and security to people that are making billion-dollar AI decisions in our government, right? So, it's everywhere for sure. It's probably a virus within the security community to say AI, everything. We're going to RSA next week. I'm assuming every booth is going to say AI in it, even though 99% of it's not true. But I think as an aspiration, it's awesome. I think it's like where we want to go, because we need 100 times more people than we have. So this is one way to get there, right? As we're training up new people and as we're going more international, you can add this new element of AI, and I think it does help us scale.
Yep. Right. So with Stairwell, what makes you different in the marketplace?
So, we are living in a world of data first, right? It's because the second part of the AI story is most companies have crap data. Like they just have bad data, right? When it comes to security and bad telemetry, they sunset it. It's, I only have the last 30 days. That's not really how AI works, right? You have to feed the model. So we feel like data is the future, right? And then the ability to store data and process it again, make it smarter, right? So that's where we live. And, there are some of that happening in logs and telemetry, right? Like I was saying, you logged in from here today, you should have logged in from there, normal stuff. That's great. There's quite a bit happening in identity. Like, is that what you normally do? Is that the way you should log in? Are those the apps you usually touch? And I think that's a really awesome use case for AI. Regulatory requirements make us keep login data, so we have that data. What we have bad data about is files. Like, what do I touch in my organization? What's interesting? What's rare? What's not rare? Like we call prevalence in our world of in the world of malware, rare is bad, right? So Word exe exists 22 billion times. A new piece of novel malware exists once in the whole world. So how do we get to that, right? So we are a data lake company. We build data lakes. So just like you would put logs into Splunk or Chronicle, or you would put your business data into Snowflake or Datadog, we take files at scale, and we're pretty much the only ones doing that. We have some very kind of advanced technology that helps us scale that. Specifically, some of the Google search technologies that we use are pretty incredible ways to store files at scale. I've been doing this for a year. I've probably talked to 300, 400 different companies. I've maybe met 2 or 3 that have any kind of binary repo as far as all the files they've touched. It's generally very, very expensive. Companies already spent a lot of money on backup. So what is the point of this, right? And so I think that's the frontier we're really on. It's okay, now I have every file that an organization or a group of people touched for 10 years. What can you do with that, right? I can trend it, I can learn it, I can feed it to a model, I can reverse engineer a file, I can build connections between files, I can do vulnerability management, I can do asset management, I can do licensing management, because it's all in a data lake. Now, we choose to focus on our use case, which is malware, but data lakes are data lakes. There's a million things you can do with it. So I think that, I don't know if that makes us different as much as I think it makes us on sort of a leading edge where I think a lot of data is going to go. And also in a world where we have less and less network telemetry than we've ever had, users and files. That's what it comes down to, right? It's what is my user doing and what are they touching? And not necessarily where they are. It's a lot harder to do that. We used to kind of know every site everybody went to. Those days are long gone, right? So how do I sort of get in front of that? I think this is one of the ways.
Yep. And that sort of leads into my next question. What's going to be that 5-year journey for Stairwell? Where do you guys see you being? You're focused on malware now, but do you think you're going to then, change the lanes or your focus?
Well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for everybody, but fortunately for Stairwell, ransomware ain't going anywhere anytime soon, and malware's not going anywhere anytime soon. So that is a huge addressable market that we want to go be a part of the conversation, right? The second phase of that is this idea of community, right? So I have data, great. I still just have my data, right? How do I start to combine that with other data, whether it's from government, whether it's from my peer group, whether it's from vendors? We still all, one of the reasons we lose is we're all on an island. It just is a bad way to do defense, right? And so, we're looking at it can we, so if you think about our industry as kind of, the response industry has 2 problems, right? I have a detection problem and I have a data problem, right? I could build incredible detections, that I have no idea if they work because I need to have enough data to make a test. And I got an incredible amount of data in the world's worst detection, and that's not going to get me anywhere either. So I started talking about how do I join these things. So one of the things that we're doing is launching data sharing programs at the ISACs, right? So I am going around to every ISAC. Basically, I literally spent all morning with one of the ISACs on this program of how do we collaborate better with file-based telemetry and detection engineering, right? So if Walmart writes a detection rule, is there a way to make that help Target? Target writes a rule, is there a way to make that help Macy's or Nordstrom? Like, this is the stuff that I'm the most interested in, right? And I am way less interested in what one vendor could do for the market than how to serve the market to help itself. Like, I think that's more interesting to me. And that was obviously, I know you're a big ISAC person, and that was one of the founding principles of ISACs. It's like, let's build a safe room where we can share, right? It's worked, but I think it could work better. And one of those ways is telemetry. And the other way is detection engineering, which is, I think, the forefront. So I think if we can become a community that supports detection engineering, I think we become incredibly valuable part of the ecosystem and really important. We also, by the way, believe in it. So that's the most important thing. And then, from there, it's going to be about training the model, right? It's going to be about AI. It's going to be about ML. And we already have a fair amount of ML on the platform to do malware analysis, but it's going to be, can I get to 2 trillion files, right? Can I understand what every file on the planet looks like and when something doesn't look like that, right? I mean, that's kind of like in the government, the Palantir side stuff where I've got so much data that I can start finding weirdness. I can start finding the thing that doesn't belong. And that's all guesses until you have enough data, right? I can look at 100,000 files and tell you which ones I think are malware. I can look at 2 billion files and almost tell you for sure. I can look at 2 trillion files and tell you 100%. Like, that shouldn't be here, right? So that's, I think, the journey that we're on. So for me, it's about filling the lake up with good data and then applying the best possible engineering to it I can. Like, that's my job. And that is mostly coming from my customers. I would never pretend I'm smarter than these customers I'm working with. They are so smart and so much better funded than anybody in the vendor side is. So why wouldn't I take advantage of that? Why wouldn't I go to Chase and B of A and AIG and Target and Walmart and Zoom and all these companies that know a lot and go, hey, like, are you willing to share what you've learned? Almost always the answer is yes. Almost always the answer is yes. And then, okay, well, how do I scale that? How do I make that logic work for everybody, right? And I think that's the frontier that we're on probably for the next 5 years, or at least the next few years, and then AI from there, right? How do I replace everybody who does malware engineering with AI bots? Probably not going to happen in 5 years, but it's going to be the quest.
Right, yeah. Lots of unknowns there. So with RSA just around the corner, you're going there, you're taking a team. What is one of the hopes that you're looking to achieve? Are you going there to sell a message? You're going to go, if you were to unpack it, what would be the driving message you'd go in there with?
So, this will be my 23rd RSA. I think it'll be my 25th Black Hat this year. So I've seen it change a lot, right? The first DEF CON I ever went to was literally in a parking lot of a crappy casino because we didn't have enough money to do anything else. Times have changed, right? You see these booths now, you're like, we couldn't barely afford to feed ourselves in 1999, right? So it's a different world. RSA has become outsized, right? It's so big. So I do think you have to sort of look past the marketing stuff and the noise and go like, okay, what are people actually thinking? I also think, unfortunately, the amount of users there has dropped and the amount of vendors has gone through the roof, right? So, and I'm saying this as a vendor, it's harder to get to truth on the customer side. So what I focus on is what truths can I learn from the vendor side? Like, who can I, know a lot of people there, I work with a lot of people there. What can I learn what can we learn from each other? About the market, about what customers' expectations are, about where we're winning, where we're losing. Oh, look, the Halcyon guys think this about ransomware, and Palo's thinking this about zero trust. And I love to learn that stuff. And again, a lot of it's hype, but a lot of it is coming from a place of trying to make customers happy. And so you can sort of infer some things. I still think, cloud is super immature. I still think data posture management is super immature. I think identity is super immature. Am I going to see amazing, innovative firewall technology? Probably not, right? Am I going to see just the most incredible DLP solution you've ever seen? Probably not. But like, there's a chance. So for me, and this is just the way I approach it, I start in the back, right? And especially at RSA, there's these little villages, right? And they have like a dude or a gal, it's their company. Maybe they have 2 people there, and they're from Germany or Japan or the RSA, startup competition or whatever. I want to go right there. Like that's the first place I go. I go right past CrowdStrike and Palo and S1 and go right to the back. And I start there. Okay, what are you guys telling me? Like, and if you would have done that 5 years ago, you would have seen cloud security posture management. You would have seen data security posture management. You would have seen identity as a service. Like you would have seen a lot of these things. Not that those are the guys who necessarily made it to do it, but they're the ones talking about it first because that's how you get funding, right? So I love doing that. I love going to the VC meetups. If you can get into any of those kind of events, they're super interesting. I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time at the Google kind of side event at the Marriott that is pretty interesting, which probably will come out after RSA, but like, that'll be an interesting kind of checkpoint to see like what's Google's ecosystem doing. Always love hearing about Microsoft's ecosystem because they're very important to our world. So I'll just kind of do that, hop around, and then obviously, see friends and old acquaintances as I go. But I would kind of like ear to the ground, like what's coming next? Like what are people going to be talking about in a year that isn't just AI? I know AI, but like that's not that interesting.
Yeah. Any of those major conferences that I go, it's the unofficial conference, behind the scenes that I get the most value out of.
Sure.
You mentioned Black Hat and DEF CON, and I love that. We weren't at the casino. We're always at some other place. Like now we're, someone rents a mansion and we all go there and all the actual hackers get together and we have those in-depth conversations, and, we're sort of putting nicknames to names and faces, and we give each other that wink and nod, and then we go away and do our thing again. It's extremely fascinating.
So I think that's one of the frontiers of our industry is somewhere between corporate marketing booth putting up messages and a bunch of hackers around a pool in a mansion in Vegas is value. Like that we have to connect better than we do. Seeing them once a year, having a couple of drinks, making fun of some stuff, and then seeing them again the next year isn't fast enough. Our adversaries collaborate way better than we do, which is not ideal, right? So that's when I talk about community. That's one of the things I'm talking about. It's like, okay, how do I extend that in a meaningful way to like my everyday life? And it does happen. There's Discord groups, there's signal groups, there's regional cons, but even that, a lot of it these days, like companies, vendors sort of have their hands on it, right? They're trying to control it and try to make it about themselves. And so it's like, how do we make it about you guys? How do we make it about responders? How do we make it about hackers? And I think the hacker community is better at this, right, than the responder community. I think like pen testers, people who break into stuff for a living, I used to work for a bug bounty company. Like they're always collaborating, right? Because it's the same attack surface everywhere. So my tool will work for you, your tool will work for me. So I think they're better at it than we are, but I do think there's a way to extend that culture farther up the food chain than it is today. Especially with the ISACs where there's already sharing agreements and things that make it easier. But I think even just I'm always fascinated when I talk to customers by how much they think vendors work together and how little we do, right? Where they go like, oh, well, SentinelOne knows about it, CrowdStrike knows about it. Nope, like that's not how that works at all. And so same thing in ISACs, like you think because one bank knows about it, another one does. Not necessarily, right? So I think that's a big part of this too, is like how do we make that better? Yeah,
it's definitely going to take a village to solve the problem, that's for sure.
Yeah. No company's going to win it by themselves. I don't even care if you're Google or Microsoft or if you have the resources of an Amazon. They still reach out. They still want community. They still know they don't know everything. And if they don't, what hope does a regular company have, right? Like these are the $1 trillion valuation companies. I guess maybe other than Apple maybe doesn't know everything about their ecosystem. But other than that, the rest of us who are living in multi-OS ecosystems can't figure out everything. So it's definitely
it's a great problem to solve, that's for sure. And Aaron, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you? Are you active on LinkedIn or social media? How can people get in contact with you and Stairwell?
Yeah, so I'm fairly well connected on LinkedIn. I got quite a large network, so I always love to connect with people on LinkedIn. You can drop me a note there anytime. I accept every connect unless it looks like an AI bot. I'm also just AMOG at Stairwell. Like if you want to get a hold of me, and collaborate that way. I'm pretty easy to define. If you type Aaron Mog into LinkedIn, I think the only one. It's super easy to find. It'll be me. And then I'm at cons. I'm always everywhere, right? So like that's my job. I'm sort of the chief evangelist around here. So yeah, if you're going to Blythe, so like I said, probably come out after RSA, but if you're going to any of the ISAC conferences, if you're going to Black Hat, if you're going to DevCon, if you're going to any of that kind of stuff, we're also going to be at First in Japan at the end of May for all the responders that are lucky enough to get funding to go to Japan. I'm not going. A couple other people got a chance to go. I've been to Japan plenty of times, so somebody else wanted to go. But yeah, we love our community. We love responders. This is a company built by responders, like for responders, and not like in a cheesy way, like this is the toy we wish we always had kind of way. So we tend to do a lot of that kind of community outreach stuff. We usually do LabsCon, which is one's conference. We usually go to like a lot of the IR conferences. So I'm usually around in all those places.
Oh, great. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. And
Okay.
how can you oversimplify your message for the mum and dads out there? What Stairwell does? Can you wrap it into one sentence?
So
to walk away from this podcast today, what do you want to tell them?
So I think our job, especially when you're talking about like we're talking about retail ISAC, right? So we do all the malware sharing in that community, and these are all the companies that are the backbone of America, right? These are the places we go and spend our money and buy our groceries, and buy our shoes, and buy our cars, and all that, and stay in hotels, and like all these things that really matter to regular people. I get their back so they can get yours, right? That's my job. Like I will never interact with a consumer in my company, but I interact with all of the companies that interact with consumers. So if I can make them better, then I'm helping everybody be better, right? So I really do, like I have worked in consumer security, I've worked in corporate security, and I do think the influence in corporate security is outsized if you do it right, because I just think you touch so many more people. And I've had loved ones get their data lost. I helped originally build a company called LifeLock, which was an identity protection company before it kind of what it is today. And I really care about this. Like I care about the mom, the teacher, the grandma. Like I don't want them to lose their data. I don't want them to have their weekend ruined because they can't use their credit cards. Like it's terrible, right? And I think in security, especially nowadays, we lose that so fast, right? It becomes about valuation and ARR and like that. And at the end of the day, like we really are here to serve. Like that's our job, right? Maybe not at the elevated levels like that military will or something like that, but I always kind of view it as it is mission driven. Like I'm here to help the moms and pops. And if you don't believe that, then get out of our business, right? Go do something else. Go, build web apps nobody cares about or something. But I think at the end of the day, like if I help one of my friends at one of these companies out, I'm helping everybody out. And that's the way I view it.
Well, Aaron, it's been a pleasure to have you on the first Drop Bear podcast.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, man. It's great talking to you again. It's always great talking to you, and I'm sure I will see you very soon.
Most definitely.